Welcome to the Gospel Addict Podcast. I'm Greg Bryan.
And I'm Jim Reske.
We're gospel addicts because we believe the gospel of Jesus isn't just good news, it's the best news ever.
We're addicted to the gospel because it doesn't just start us out in the Christian life, it is the Christian life.
Join us as we look at the Bible through the lens of the gospel.
Thanks so much for listening.
Welcome back to another episode of the Gospel Addict Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you listening. I'm your co-host, Greg Bryan. I'm joined with my other co-host, or the other co-host of this show, Jim Reske. And tonight we're going to do a little debrief because Jim just recently taught on Galatians chapters 3 through 6. The second part of the book of Galatians, and he did an amazing, 4. Yeah, that's right. 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, you did 1, 2, and 3.
I did 1, 2, and 3. Jim did 4, 5, and 6. You did a fantastic job, Jim.
Well, thanks, Greg. I thought yours was great too. That was like a 1-2 punch. It was so nice.
I don't know if you saw my standing ovation at the end, but I was.
I thought, was that tomato from you? I thought that was from you.
The tomato, yeah. Just ignore that. Ignore that. But what we like to do is there's a talk that we prepare, and we often do podcasts just as we're preparing for these Bible studies that we teach. And then we usually broadcast the Bible study itself, which we've done recently. And then we like to do kind of the AfterTalk. Sometimes I call it the talk that we wish we would have given, because sometimes there's the talk you prepare, the talk you deliver, and then the talk you wish you would have delivered. So, Jim, what are some of your observations about, as you reflect on your talk? Is there anything you wish you would have said that you didn't?
Well, there's a whole bunch of things I wish I would have done differently. And I'm thinking that when we did the debrief for your talk, and you were saying, actually, it came off okay. It was kind of like, remember it's one of your better, simpler debriefs, because you were saying I kind of said the things I wanted to say and said them in the way I wanted to say them, and I think it was okay. There's a bunch of little things I would change. I think
let's discuss them.
Yeah, so just this is no particular order, though. I'll try to divide them into like style and substance. So like style points are just the way I was speaking and the way I was trying to communicate these things, and then some substance, some theology things that have come up, that came up during the talk and since. Some that I couldn't get in, some that I dropped in the interest of time. And so we'll get to that. But just in terms of style, I did go back. I had to listen to it again because we were editing it for time. And so I listened to it, and it's, first of all, I get a lot of feedback or criticism in general that I'm talking too fast. And I hear that, and I'm trying to slow down. I get really excited about these points. I feel like there's a lot to cover. I want to make sure I get it in the time allotted. And as you and I often talk about, this is an open forum Bible studies. For the listeners' benefit, we usually have 50 or 60 people there in person, anywhere from 20. Last week we had 39 on Zoom, Greg.
Yep.
So, live streaming, watching it. And anyone can interrupt you anytime with questions. So planning the time is a challenge. And if it's just something it's a challenge for everybody, it's what you do. If you were some preacher in church, you say, I've got 20 minutes for my sermon or 40 minutes of the sermon, you can time it out. You could just practice it. You could read it and your timing is perfect. But if, 2 minutes if you're a preacher and 2 minutes into your sermon, someone raises their hand and says, I'm not sure I agree with that. I want to talk about this. And, it's just, the timing is always a bit of a thing. So I feel that pressure of timing, and that I think I end up talking fast because I have these thoughts. I want to get them out. Because I know that, inevitably there'll be discussion and challenge questions and all the rest to kind of take that. But this time that's a common thing I'm trying to work on.
Yeah. Let me address that real quick, because
go ahead.
You do speak fast, but I take it as it's excitement. It comes across to me like how excited you are to communicate God's word and God's truth and the things that you've discovered. So, and I don't have a problem with it at all.
Oh, good. Well, that's good.
I don't think it doesn't I don't know that it's something you need to work on, like to change.
Well, I'll tell you in particular, because listening to it again, and by the way, I almost never do this. I don't know if you do, but I generally hate to go back and listen to yourself because it just cringe almost.
I don't like listening to myself either.
No, no. So rather not do that. But this time I did, and I thought because I'm trying, I have this feeling. I am excited about it. I am, and I do want to get the thoughts out. I end up doing two things in particular. One is clipping off my own sentences. So I'm so eager to get to the next sentence. I'll be in the middle of one sentence. Anyway, I start the next sentence that way. I just want to, but it just gets, and so I'm clipping off my own sentences and not finishing them and just go right to the next one. And I just like, wow, I didn't know that I did that until I listened to it. And then I realized, oh, I'm like interrupting myself and not finishing the thought and it's jumping to the next one. So that was one thing. And then another thing is that I find that in this talk in particular, I don't know if I always do this, but because I don't go back and listen, but in this one, I would sometimes switch my point of view in the talk. So I'm saying something to you about Galatians, and then I'd say, but this is what the Judaizers would say, and they would say this. And I would be talking in the Judaizers' voice, and then I was talking about the people who teach rewards theology. And the way I should introduce it is the way I'm doing it with you now. I say, now, wait a second. The Judaizers had that to say, but if the rewards people could speak, they would say this in response. And then the listener knows the next thing you're saying is from that perspective of this party. And then you drop that and you say, but I would say a way to reconcile these, whatever. So the person always knows what perspective you're taking. And what I found listening to it is I would jump around quickly and just jump into that voice and say something and then answer that criticism or respond from the opposite view. And like, I'm not taking the listener along with me. And I think people kind of generally get the gist of what perspective you're saying when you say these things, but I just noticed that, and it's a speaking habit that I was totally unaware of.
Well, and some of that,
say, well,
and some of that, you might pick it up. You might pick it up easier because you're listening to audio only, but you actually had visuals too. You had a slideshow. So you were at times referring to a chart.
Right.
And so I think that the audience that was present there was able to follow you. But those are interesting observations. And I mean, in that sense, I think, that could be a skill to kind of sharpen up, is like not clipping your own sentences. That's pretty interesting.
I'm sure I've done it my whole life, Craig. I just never really noticed it before. Like I'm probably doing it in this conversation now. And if I would go back to listen, you say, oh yeah, you're not even letting yourself speak. You're so excited to get to the next sentence that you drop the last 10% of the last sentence and just go on. And then that shifting perspective thing, I thought, as a speaker, I'm listening to myself. I know what perspective I'm taking, but I gotta be more careful to bring the listener along with me. So anyway, those were things. And then
listen, I want to tell you something. Like I've been to like so many different churches in my whole life, and I've listened to lots and lots of preachers. And Jim, you are like as good as 80% of the best Bible teachers I've ever listened to, as far as your speaking, your clarity, your voice, your content. I mean, you could easily, so I don't beat yourself up too much about your pace and so I mean, I think you're excellent.
Well, thanks, Greg. That's really encouraging. Great to hear you say that. Coming from you, I really appreciate that. But it's always good to kind of reflect and learn and try to improve and listen and
absolutely. I mean, I want to improve every time I speak. I want to do a better job.
That's right.
I want to do a better job. Was there anything content wise?
Well, this is kind of in between content and style and substance. So when I finished up, someone came up to me and said, wow, that was a bold move, not getting to Galatians until 40 minutes into it.
Somebody said that to you.
Yeah. And so, I don't know if they listen to the podcast, but if they are a listener of the podcast, then I think, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I think they meant it to be like, just kind of a, teasing, maybe a half truth, but
right.
So I said this at the beginning, if you recall. I said, look, there's different ways to kind of set these things up. You could just say, look, let's just open the Bible and read Galatians 4. Now let's read Galatians 5. Now let's just plow through.
Right.
And we often do that in the study, and I've done that. And so, or you say, well, I got these, you taught me this, I get this from you. Like, I got these three themes, and I'm just going to set up an order of importance. So number one is the most important. So if we don't get to two and three, it's okay, because we got to number one, and that was the real thing, right?
Yeah.
And if we never get to three, that's fine. And I said, this one is, oh, I said, there's a third one, which is like there's 7 points, and they all get to this climactic conclusion, number seven. And then I'm really stressed because if you got interruptions, you only get to six. And that was the Abraham talk was like that. I said, if I don't get to the climactic end where Abraham is going to sacrifice Isaac in the mountain, none of it makes any sense. There I go, clipping my sentences. None of it makes any sense, but it's not coherent if you don't get to point number seven in that kind of talk.
Right.
But this one was problem solution. So I spent like this setup talking about this problem of the Judaizers, but mostly of this whole rewards theology, which I think is a problem we've talked about in the podcast and before. And I think that's kind of a problem. I was trying to make the point that these are modern day Judaizers. And so Galatians is a solution for that. So therefore, I didn't get to Galatians until, and that was actually 36 minutes into the talk. So I went back and looked at their recording. But it's the first half hour, not getting to the text. And I think some people, they say, we're here for a Bible study. When are you going to get to Galatians? It's been 25 minutes and you haven't mentioned Galatians yet. I could hear that. So, but this is problem solution. So I was doing that for a reason.
Well, yeah, and you had a legit reason for the way you taught it that way, and I thought you communicated that well. By the way, one of the things I love about our Bible study is we have like 7 or 8 different teachers. Every single one of us has a unique style.
Yeah.
And I don't want, I don't have the feeling that I want all the other teachers to teach the same way I teach.
Right.
I really like the diversity. Like, I like that your style is different than my style. And so I'm not, I wouldn't want everybody to teach the exact same way. So it's kind of cool. I think that's one of the beautiful things about what we do is as we walk through the Bible and then we keep going through the Bible year after year, is different people teach the same passages, but they see it from a different angle and their teaching style is different. And I just think it's so cool. I just love that. And some people are like super, super practical. Some are more theological. Some are more, so we all have our different styles, but that's interesting. Now, were you aware, like, before that guy made that comment to you, like in your preparation, did you think, like, were you aware that you weren't going to get to Galatians? Like, you weren't?
I definitely was aware that I was going to go that I was going to set up the problem. And it wasn't like I was just talking about rambling about, my opinions. I was looking at scriptures, right? On the rewards theology and all the rest. So, so there was a reason for setting it up that way and drawing the parallel to the Judaizers. But no, I did. And then you recall at one point, one person said, I just have to say something, made a comment. And I said, maybe it's a good time for some more comments. I absolutely shouldn't have done that. Having tried to keep the conversation
there.
Yeah, and because then I looked down and said, "Oh shoot!"
3 hands went up
right away. And if you ask, and people want to talk, and that's why it's a Bible study. If we do that, but it's basically what happened. Then as I looked down at my watch, and I'm like, it's 45 minutes in. I'm at the 30-minute point, 45 minutes in. And then you say, "Oh shoot!" I've got to kind of condense a little bit the things I was going to say. So, for example, there's a big story you and I talked about in the prep podcast about, if you really believe in rewards theology and, the question is just how well do you think you're going to do under this system? You think you're going to go to Jesus with confidence? And remember I said the example of like, well, let's say we're all in the waiting room and an angel bursts in and an angel says, all right, everybody listen up, line up in order of righteousness. I want the 10s in front because judging you is fast and easy. And the ones go to the back. And then I made the point, like you would see the apostle Paul running to the back of the line because he called himself the chief of sinners. I was all set to do that. But of course, that's a little story that goes on for, a minute or two. Like I just cut that out, go on to the next thing. And I like it. I think it really adds to the whole
Yeah, I wish
understanding
I
of
wish you would
rewards
have.
theology.
Yeah, I wish you would have shared that.
Yeah, because even the line of, well, if you really do believe in this rewards theology, just how well do you think you're going to do? Because then you're taking a little pride in your spiritual accomplishments. Like we don't, for our listeners tonight, we don't have to belabor. We talked about that in some detail in the prequel,
Right.
and but I did, it is additive, but it just shows you as you're going through, if you're like, oh, I'm behind on my marks at the 30-minute point, I should be here, the 45-minute point, I'll be here. Something's got to give. Like, and I got to the Galatians 5, the fruit of the spirit, and just covered it in 90 seconds. And
Right.
you could
You could have
talk
done
for
the whole thing on
the
that.
whole thing. In fact, in 2 years from now, if I do it again by luck of the draw, I'll probably just do the fruit of the spirit. We'll just do Galatians 5, and that's it. It's so rich. Obviously, it's one of the richer passages in the New Testament. The love, joy, peace. I mean, there's so much there.
Right.
And I kind of made one quick point on it, but it was just an example of like the pace and got to cut out some material. And then, we all think I don't know, I think my material is all really, really important. And, studies show, I remember looking at studies years ago, Greg, that people say, if you and I have a great conversation, which is kind of why we started doing these podcasts. And then tomorrow I say, wow, we talk for an hour. What do we talk about? The most you're able to really summarize is 5%. And you
Yeah.
think about it, you
That's
say,
so
oh yeah, I said we already
discouraging.
talked for hours. Oh yeah, what'd you talk about? Oh, you just you
That's
can't
got to be
remember.
so discouraging to really to speakers, you know.
Yeah, I think my wife just heard about it. She was listening to something that said that reminded me of that little 5% stat
I mean,
because
today the sermon at church was fantastic,
it's fantastic. How much could you
but
remember? If we both
but
tried to
I
summarize it now,
probably could only remember about 5 minutes of it.
5%. Unless you're taking careful notes, going through and review the notes like a student for a test. But they'd be like that's why the faith comes through hearing. You just got to hear it again and again and again and again and again. So anyway, I did on a real positive note. I did have a couple of people come up to me afterwards that morning and really, really positive feedback, and not just the feedback like Jim, you did a good job. That's always nice.
Right.
But guys, a couple guys just come and talk about excited about Jesus and excited about the gospel, and that's what I love.
That's
That
what
feeling
you
of like,
want.
oh my gosh, yeah, it's not
Yeah, you don't need
Jim.
the
You
you don't
spoke
need the
well, but
attaboys,
no,
attaboy.
no, right, right. I don't care. No, absolutely not. Or someone saying you spoke well, but you didn't get to Galatians until 40 minutes in, or but like someone saying, when it just resonating with the love of Christ and being saved by the grace and by the blood and the gospel, and like there were a couple guys that came up, like three or four, and like you could tell they're just touching like this, this whole notion of that Jesus sanctifies me, that like that it's not based on my performance, and they were in touch with the content of what you and I get excited. Why the reason why we're gospel addicts, right?
Yeah.
That I am. Jesus is the one by faith. He's sanctifying me, not my hard work and effort. And and then yesterday, because it's
That
been a
makes
week.
it all worthwhile.
Oh my
That makes it
gosh,
all
yes.
worthwhile.
So I had two guys come to me yesterday too to say that, boy, I was really thinking about what you said last week, and then one guy in particular yesterday morning, he said, I think what the one thing you said that's sticking with me. I'm thinking like that change is not like the direct. He didn't say these words. I kind of rephrased it back. So what you're saying is this, because this is what
Yeah.
I was trying to get. And he said, yeah, that's it. That's it. It's the idea that you don't change your life through direct application against your flesh. You change your life changes because your direct application is focusing on Jesus all the time. And then indirectly your life changes. That's the dotted line moving.
Yes.
And he was getting that. He's like, that's kind of like, really life changing,
See, the problem is we focus on ourself, and we focus like
That's right.
so much of even in the secular world is self-improvement.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
it's how can I change myself?
That's right.
So we just take that right into our Christian faith.
So it makes my faith
But
all
it's really a byproduct, like really
yep.
true transformation is a byproduct of
A changed heart.
a
I mean,
changed heart, which
yeah.
is based on your gratitude and realization of what Jesus has done for you.
Amen. That's it exactly. And that's it exactly. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Gospel Addict Podcast. Feel free to contact us via email at gospeladdictpodcast@gmail.com.
Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, on your worst days, you're never beyond the reach of God's grace, and on your best days, you're never beyond the need of God's grace.
See you next time.